My family controlled me my whole life. Then my girlfriend joined in, secretly spying on me to feed them updates. Now they're both gone for good. I'm 27, male. It all starts with my family. You know the type. Picture perfect from the outside, toxic as hell on the inside. My parents always had a favorite, my brother. I'll call him G. He's the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Me? I was just the backup plan. The disappointment. They'd parade around when they needed to look like good parents. For most of my life, I played along, tried to be the good son. I'd watch as G got everything: praise, money, opportunities, while I got the scraps. It became so painfully obvious that they didn't see me as anything more than a tool to prop up G's achievements. And every time I thought they couldn't hurt me more, they found a way to top themselves. The final straw came a year ago. G had screwed up, big time. He had messed up a huge project at his job, something that cost him his position. So, of course, my parents were desperate to fix it for him. And guess what their solution was? Me. They came to me asking, no, demanding, that I use my contacts in the industry to help him out. They didn't ask me how I was doing, didn't care about the job I just landed that I'd worked my ass off for. It was all about saving G. I said no. For the first time in my life, I put my foot down. And man, you'd have thought I'd committed some kind of unforgivable sin. My mom cried, my dad fumed, and G just stood there, smug, like he knew they'd figure something out for him eventually. When I told them I was done, that I couldn't take being their second choice anymore, they acted like I was the one betraying them. So I cut them off, blocked their numbers, stopped visiting for holidays, the whole 9 yards. I had to, for my own sanity. It was hard, don't get me wrong, but it was the healthiest decision I'd ever made. I felt lighter without their constant manipulation hanging over my head. For the past year, I'd been rebuilding my life. I was focusing on my career, making new friends, and most importantly, I had my girlfriend E. She was my rock. We'd been together for 2 years, and she was there through it all. The drama with my family, the emotional fallout, everything. I trusted her more than anyone. I thought she had my back. But last week, everything fell apart, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It started with small things. He would make offhand comments about my parents, things I hadn't told her in months, or she'd bring up G in casual conversation, even though I hadn't mentioned him since I cut them off. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I'd said something in passing, or maybe she just remembered more than I gave her credit for. But then she started getting weird. She'd ask me specific questions about my life, who I was hanging out with, where I'd been, if I'd run into anyone from my family. It wasn't until I came home early from work one day that everything started to click. He was on the phone, and she didn't hear me come in. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the way she was talking made me freeze in the doorway. He's been fine, she was saying, her voice low. Yeah, I'll let you know if he says anything. No, he hasn't mentioned wanting to reconnect yet. I stood there, my heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. She was talking about me, but who the hell was she talking to? I'll try to bring up G again, she continued. Maybe he's softened up. I don't know, but I'll keep pushing. That's when it hit me. She was talking to my parents. My parents. The same people I'd cut off, the same ones who had treated me like I was expendable. And E, the one person I thought I could trust, had been feeding them information this entire time. I must have made some kind of noise because he whipped around and saw me standing there. The color drained from her face. Who are you talking to? I asked, my voice cold and unfamiliar even to me. She hung up the phone quickly, stuffing it in her pocket like that would somehow erase what I just heard. Nobody, she said, her voice shaky. Don't lie to me, E. Who the hell were you just talking to? She hesitated, then sighed. Rubbing her temples like this was somehow my fault. It's not what you think, okay? Oh, really? Because it sounds a hell of a lot like you've been spying on me for my parents. The same people I told you I wanted nothing to do with. I wasn't spying, she snapped. Like that made it any better. I was just keeping them updated. They're worried about you. Worried about me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They don't give a damn about me. They only care about G, and you know that. So why are you working for them? She shifted on her feet, avoiding my eyes. They asked me to stay close to you, make sure you were okay. They just wanted to know what was going on in your life. I let out a bitter laugh. And you thought it was a good idea to go behind my back and feed them information? How long has this been going on? Her silence was answer enough. Months. Maybe the entire time since I'd cut them off. I felt sick. This woman who I trusted more than anyone had been betraying me in the worst possible way. And for what? To keep my parents happy? The same parents who had never once been there for me when it mattered? You should have told me, I said, my voice raw. You should have told me the moment they reached out to you. I didn't want to make things worse, she said, her voice small, as if she was the victim here. I thought I was helping. Helping who? I snapped. Because you sure as hell weren't helping me. She didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there, looking at me with those wide, pleading eyes, like she expected me to forgive her. Like she thought I'd just sweep this under the rug, because she meant well. But I couldn't. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. You need to leave, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. What? She looked at me like I'd slapped her. You're seriously kicking me out over this? I was just trying to. To what? I cut her off. Lie to me? Spy on me? Betray me? Yeah, I'm kicking you out, E. I can't trust you. Not after this. She stood there for a moment, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. And when I didn't, she huffed and grabbed her things, muttering under her breath the entire time. She slammed the door on her way out, and just like that, she was gone. But the damage was already done. The next few days were a blur. I was numb. I didn't know how to process the fact that the one person I thought I could trust had been lying to me for months. That my parents, who I had finally managed to escape, had found a way back into my life through her. It felt like I'd been hit by a truck, and I couldn't even find the words to explain how deeply it hurt. Then the text started. From my parents, of course. We're worried about you, one said. We just want to talk. You can't shut us out forever, said another. They didn't understand. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. Either way, I wasn't responding. I was done playing their game. A part of me wanted to confront them, to call them up and demand to know why they couldn't just leave me alone. Why they had to go behind my back, using E like some kind of pawn in their twisted game. But what would that accomplish? It would just give them more power, more control. So I did the only thing I could do. I blocked their numbers. Again, I wish I could say that made me feel better. But the truth is, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of it. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that the people I should have been able to trust the most were the ones who hurt me the worst. I don't know where I go from here. I'm rebuilding again. I'm not sure how long it'll take for me to trust someone again, or if I ever will. But one thing's for sure, I'm done with my family. For good this time. No more second chances, no more letting them sneak back into my life. I'm finally free. And as for E, I still don't know if she fully understands what she did. Maybe she thought she was doing the right thing. Maybe she convinced herself that she was helping. But in the end, intentions don't matter. Actions do. And her actions prove that she wasn't on my side. Not really. Maybe she was on her own side, trying to stay in good graces with everyone. But in doing so, she stabbed me in the back. In the days after she left, I started piecing everything together. Small details that I should have noticed but was too blind to see at the time. The way she would ask about my job, but always seemed more interested in how I was getting along with my family. How she'd casually drop in comments about G, trying to see if I'd softened toward him. I even remembered one time, months ago, when we ran into an old family friend and she had this look on her face like she'd been caught. It wasn't just spying, it was manipulation, plain and simple. She was pushing me toward them the entire time, slowly, like turning the dial up on a stove so I wouldn't notice until I was burning. And maybe that's the part that hurt the most. She didn't just betray me by feeding them information. She tried to control the way I thought, the way I felt. She didn't trust me enough to make my own decisions. Or worse, she didn't want me to make my own decisions. She wanted me back under their thumb, where she was comfortable and didn't have to deal with the messy reality of me cutting them off. In her mind, maybe it was easier if I just forgave my parents, if I could just be a happy little family again. But she didn't understand that what she wanted wasn't possible. Not for me. Not after everything I went through growing up, constantly being compared to G, constantly feeling like I was less. I spent my entire childhood trying to prove that I was worth something, and it never mattered. They never saw me as anything more than a tool to help G. And she, my girlfriend, was complicit in that. I thought I'd moved on from the pain of my family. But this betrayal cut deeper than I expected. It brought it all back, made me question whether I'd ever really escape. Was I cursed to keep running into people who would push me back toward that toxic environment? Who would try to convince me that I was the problem for walking away? It was like ripping open an old wound that never quite healed. I spent hours thinking about it, going over every moment we'd had together, trying to figure out if I had missed something crucial from the beginning. Did she always have an agenda? Was it always about my parents? Or did it just become that after they got to her? I couldn't decide which was worse, the idea that she was always working against me, or the idea that my parents had been able to manipulate her, just like they tried to manipulate me. The funny thing is, looking back, there were warning signs, little moments that didn't feel right but I brushed off because I loved her and trusted her. I told myself she had my best interests at heart. But she was always a little too eager for me to make up with my family, always pushing me to be the bigger person, even when I knew that meant sacrificing my own happiness for theirs. I thought she was being supportive, but now I see that it was something else entirely. She was always trying to steer me toward what she thought was best, not what I needed. A couple of days after he left, I got a call from an unknown number. I normally don't answer those, but for some reason, I did. And guess who it was? My mom. I don't know how she got through the block. Maybe she used someone else's phone. But there she was trying to sound all concerned and motherly. "We're just worried about you, honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We haven't heard from you in so long, and we know how hard things have been for you. We're family, and we should be there for each other." I felt a familiar anger rise in my chest, the audacity of her to act like she cared, like she was the victim here. I couldn't hold back anymore. "You don't get to act concerned now," I snapped. "Not after everything you've done. And by the way, using my girlfriend to spy on me? Real nice. That's exactly the kind of toxic crap that made me cut you off in the first place." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she sighed, like she was tired of dealing with a stubborn child. "She was just trying to help," my mom said, her voice losing that fake sweetness. "We were worried about you. You've been so distant, and you won't talk to us. We had no choice." "No choice?" I laughed bitterly. "You had plenty of choices. You could have respected my boundaries. You could have left me alone instead of trying to manipulate me through her." "Boundaries? You're our son," she snapped, her patience clearly wearing thin. "You don't get to just walk away from your family." "That's exactly what I did," I said coldly, "and I'll keep doing it. You're never going to control me again." With that, I hung up. I blocked that number too, just to be safe. But the conversation left me rattled. It wasn't just the manipulation. It was the way she refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. In her mind, they were always the victims. And I was the ungrateful son who couldn't see how much they loved me. But I saw it clearly now. Their version of love came with strings attached, conditions, expectations. It wasn't about me. It was about control. I wish I could say that hanging up on her felt good, like some kind of closure. But it didn't. Not really. It just felt empty. Because no matter how many times I cut them off, they'd always find a way to weasel back into my life. Through guilt, through manipulation, or through other people like E. And I realized then that I couldn't just cut them off physically. I had to let go emotionally too. That was the hard part. The part one wasn't sure I'd ever fully manage. A few weeks passed and I started focusing on myself again. Therapy helped. I talked through the anger, the betrayal, The lingering guilt that maybe somehow I was the one in the wrong. But every time I talked it out, the more I realized just how deeply I'd been manipulated. Not just by my parents, but by E as well. They were all part of the same game, one I never wanted to play in the first place. One night, as I was scrolling through my phone, I got a notification from E. Apparently, she'd made a new account and tried to reach out. Her message was long, full of apologies and explanations. She said she never meant to hurt me, that she thought she was doing the right thing by staying in touch with my parents. She said she missed me, and that she hoped we could talk, maybe work things out. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because how do you rebuild trust after something like that? How do you go back to pretending everything's fine when someone you loved so deeply showed you they were willing to betray you so easily? I don't know if I'll ever forgive her, or my parents. But what I do know is that I'm done letting other people dictate my life. I'm done being the puppet in their game. For once, I'm putting myself first. And if you've watched this far, thanks for sticking with me through the mess. If you've got family drama like mine, just remember, you don't owe anyone anything, especially not your peace of mind. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.